just have to always be able to pivot. And I think that that's an important thing for people to know is if I bought this property and my plan was short term, what would my cash flow or what would this look like if I had to turn it into a midterm or a long term?
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of The Remote Investor. I'm Michael Albaum. Today, joining me is an old friend, a very special guest. She's an investor as well as a professor of real estate, which you don't come across very often, Mallory Meehan. Let's get into it. Mallory Meehan, so good to see you again. How are you?
Good, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. I'm fighting a cold, so I'm not feeling great, but other than that, I'm doing awesome.
Oh,
You and I were just chatting before we hit record here, and you were working on some really awesome stuff. So I want to hear from you. Who are you? What is it you're doing in real estate? And what is it you're working on today?
yeah, absolutely. So my name is Mallory Meehan, or other people know me as Prof M. So my full-time job is I am a real estate professor at Penn State University. And within that role, I teach students how to invest in real estate, how to analyze property, understanding the legal implications. I am an attorney, and then I'm also an appraiser. So we go through a lot of valuation assessments and understanding exactly how markets differ, but then also understanding the financial components when it comes to investing in real estate. And so I've been a real estate investor myself. I have some short-term, long-term, working in some syndication deals. And, my whole idea after starting my professor job was I realized just how inaccessible real estate education is for the public. And unless you're actually going to school or finding a degree that's related to this, you really can't find quality education around investing in real estate. And so a couple years ago, I made it a point to create an online platform that is a resource for anybody who's looking to diversify, to get into real estate investing, that is taught by me, a licensed professional, a licensed attorney, to give people a step-by-step guide of how to get their first property, their next property, how to understand different market conditions, how to evaluate different financial evaluations, how to navigate the legal outcomes or legal landscape of different places. And so I'm really excited that course is going to be launching in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, I'm so excited. What's it called? Where can people find it?
Yeah, so it's Inspire Wealth, MGT.com. And so the course is called Real Estate 101. And that's exactly what it is for those that are, new to real estate investing or just want some more solid foundation to really get a grasp of different opportunities that they could potentially get into within real estate investing.
Amazing. And you also host a podcast as well. And what's that called?
That's called Inspire Wealth with Prof M.
Amazing. So a little bit of backstory for our listeners who may not be familiar. I was actually on your podcast. You were kind enough to have me on as a guest. And I remember as soon as we started chatting, I got really upset and pretty frustrated because I was like, Mallory, you're like 15 years too late. Where were you coming into my life when I first got started investing? So how many Mallorys are out there teaching people in a professional setting, like in a school setting, how to invest in real estate?
Very few. Very few. I like to consider myself a unicorn in that if you are going to school for a real estate specific degree, most likely you're being taught by academics, and there is nothing wrong with academics. They understand very detailed processes, but for me, I am a practitioner. And I say part-time academic because I do understand the academic side, but my application has always been applied through learning. And so do by example. So go out and actually find a property. Let's underwrite it. Let's see what we could get for rent. Let's see what its cost basis is. Is this a viable option for an investor? And have students and have other individuals walk through that same process, as well as understanding what are your goals? Are your goals to diversify your portfolio? Are your goals to reduce your taxable income from a W-2? Are your goals to build long-term wealth? There are so many actionable items that people can take, but without having that foundation, that knowledge base, it's really hard for people to just jump on in and get into real estate and be successful kind of right off the bat.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I've always thought that as well. So I'm curious, did you first get started as a professor or as an attorney or as an investor?
So my grandfather had some rentals, and so I got to see that at a younger age. But after going to law school, I knew that real estate was really an area I wanted to focus on. And so when I finished college and I finished grad school, I actually worked in commercial brokerage for a while. And so I was with a small commercial brokerage firm here in town, and got to see some of the larger transactions that happen on a commercial scale. And I was like, this is really cool. Like, I had no idea that this was like, a field I could get into. And then, Penn State had an opportunity that I could then teach people about real estate. And I was like, I can't say no to this. Like, that
Yeah.
really, like, it satisfied the passion and the desire to give back, to see the difference I can make in so many people's lives. And that's really what spurred me into, I need to be practicing what I'm preaching and, starting to get investing. And so as soon as I had all my law school debt paid off, my husband and I started investing and buying rental properties and building up a portfolio.
I freaking love it. You are truly practicing what you're preaching and teaching. So real estate is, as we know, is this gargantuan thing that people can invest in that has so many different facets and asset classes and veins to go down. So what is it that you're actually teaching students in your course at Penn State?
Yeah. So, what I'm teaching them is how to, one, understand a market. And so, when you get into market analysis, it's what makes it a desirable place for people to want to invest in. So, let's understand the demographics. Let's understand what's happening in the local area to understand what might be the best avenue to rent in. So, if you're looking at an area, let's say like Charlotte, let's understand what's happening in Charlotte. What kind of population is in Charlotte? What are the age distributions? Why are people moving to Charlotte? Why are people visiting Charlotte? What companies are headquartered in Charlotte? And so you want to do a deep dive of understanding exactly what makes that market tick, and then understand what type of investment then would fit you personally. Is it you want to get into long-term rentals? Is it short-term rentals? Is it commercial? Is it industrial? And seeing how those can align with the different markets. So that's the first step, is really identifying and understanding markets. The second step is understanding the financials and valuing property. And so once you've identified the market, let's go out there and let's find a property and let's find comps and let's do an income comparison and see how much money this property is generating to see how much it's actually worth. Can you get bank financing? What kind of financing options might be available for this specific type of property? Is this an opportunity that maybe you can get creative and you can do an owner finance deal? You could do a subject to, you could do a lease option. All of these different possibilities could be an option, for the property. And then finally, looking at the legal side. Okay, now that you understand what market you're in and what type of property you're dealing with, what sort of landlord tenant law do you have to look for? Do you have to be concerned about permits? Do you have to understand the zoning laws and make sure that you're going to be permitted to be doing this particular activity in this area? So really trying to do the full circle view of what can we invest in, what's going to be sustainable, and what's also going to be legal.
I love it. That's so cool. Again, it just pisses me off hearing all this great stuff that I didn't have when I started investing. Okay, so tell me this. So like most of the students who are taking your course, are they college age? Are they young professionals? post grad? Are they adults in the area who are looking to invest because now they are working a full time? Like, what's the kind of demographic breakdown?
Yeah, so for my personal online courses, it's literally for anybody. It can be somebody who, they went to college and didn't get to take a real estate course. It could be a high school student that's looking to start investing right away and they want to learn how to house hack and understand what that looks like. It could be for working professionals that say, look, we have a lot of money that we don't want to just put in a 401k or into stocks and bonds. We want to invest it in other avenues, but they have no way of understanding where those avenues are. Because the biggest problem, and one of the big reasons why I wanted to create this, is that a lot of people have financial advisors, but those financial advisors are not going to recommend real estate as part of your portfolio.
Of
So
course not. They can't get a fee on it.
they won't get paid for it. So how can we educate people to help them understand true diversity and true understanding of how they can implement their earnings into a different vehicle? And real estate's one of those things that I tell people, we're not making any more land. It's a finite resource. If you invest in it and you sit on it long enough, the market has continually appreciated. You get so many tax benefits, and you're able to get a tenant that can cover your financial obligations plus hopefully some cash flow. And so it just makes sense as a long-term investment. It's something you can control, unlike the market. And for me, I think it's just one of those asset classes that everybody should be investing in.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree. Okay, so it's funny. As you were saying that you're an appraiser too, in my mind, I was like making this cheeky joke. I'm like, well, what? Those are going to go by the wayside because we have Zestimates now. Like everybody knows that. So talk to us a little bit about like the appraisal world and why maybe Zestimates aren't so reliable.
Yeah. And, the fact that I have my appraisal license, I have done appraisals, obviously is not my primary focus. I really wanted it to have as an education piece to thoroughly understand how to value different types of property, how property valuations can fluctuate. And I think relying exclusively on something like a Zestimate or, something from Redfin, they are looking at a multitude of things. They're looking at price per square foot. They're looking at transactions. But what they're not looking at is what happened behind the scenes. Were there seller concessions? Were there improvements that the seller agreed to do prior to closing? Were there other arrangements that were made that weren't necessarily a part of this equation? Was this a family transaction? Was this a business transaction? All of these factors that still kind of need a human touch to really understand and get the backstory before you can fully evaluate a property's value.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. That makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so it's interesting. So you start with the market, then you go to the financials, and then you go to the legal side of things. So I'm curious for everybody listening, maybe you can give us some of the fruits of your labor. What are some markets that maybe have surprised you that have some of the supporting demographics or supporting data points that says this is kind of an interesting market that maybe wouldn't have come up ordinarily?
Yeah, so some of the markets that I've seen recently have primarily been in the Midwest. And so those are markets in places like Ohio and Indiana. Also seeing some emerging markets in Tennessee and North Carolina. Now, there's not to say that you can't find a successful market in any state, but if you're looking for affordability factors, another city is Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh actually is probably one of the most affordable cities to buy in real estate, which is probably surprising to most since it's a major metropolitan. But there are pockets of the area that you could find properties for under 100,000, which is kind of surprising, especially for people from the West Coast. They're like,
Right.
this
That
exists.
doesn't exist. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
parts of Ohio, Cleveland, Columbus is a really emerging city right now. I hate to say that, given the university that's located there, but we, have seen a lot of property deals that look pretty promising in a lot of those areas.
Right on. Okay. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. So let's shift gears here to the legal side of things, because I know this is such a tripping point for so many investors, myself included, as especially as they're just getting started. It's this huge looming thing of, oh, I don't want to get sued, so I better have all my ducks in a row, and I got to have an LLC before I get started investing, and I can't do that before I invest. And so it just becomes, I feel like, a big stumbling block for so many people. So talk to us about what are the things that you teach in your course around what people need to do to get started investing on the legal front.
Yeah. And, I think every situation is a little bit different. It depends on the asset class that you're looking to invest in. If you were just looking to invest in a syndication as a limited partner, putting it in your personal name is not really disposing you to an exceptional amount of liability. If you're looking to, start small and have your first single family home, a lot of times banks aren't going to finance you unless you do it in your individual name, because your LLC doesn't have any track record or any credibility. So if you're looking to get your first investment, sometimes it's better to put it in your personal name. Now, once you've had it in your personal name for a specific period of time, depending on the state laws, a bank will allow you to then transfer that property into an LLC. And so you can do that to help form your legal protection. I see people doing house hacking. And obviously, if you're going to house hack, you need this as your primary residence. And in order for that to be your primary residence, it has to be in your personal name. So you couldn't even use an LLC in that example. And a lot of people ask, okay, I created an LLC, which anybody can create. They're very easy online. We have all these different services. An attorney can help you make sure you're filing all the correct paperwork. And so a lot of people say, well, I have the LLC. How many properties should I be keeping under one LLC? And, there's no right or wrong answer to that question.
Until after a lawsuit.
So
then you find out what the right answer was.
That's true. So what my rule of thumb is, I tell people that if the value of your property starts to exceed $1 million, at that point, it's probably best to create a separate LLC. And so in my personal opinion, it's based on value, not necessarily number of properties. And the LLC is going to have, some form of a checking account or withdraw. I tell people don't leave too much money in that, because that, again, exposes you to liability. You should be taking owner's distributions every month from that fund, so that in the event you are sued, the assets that they can actually touch, especially liquid assets, are going to be very limited.
Huh. Interesting. Okay, I want to dig into this a little bit more, because I come from the insurance world too. So this is going to be a really fun discussion. So why the million? What is it about $1 million that makes you feel that way?
And
it could be just gut feel. That's a totally acceptable answer.
Yeah, it's literally kind of gut feeling. Once you've reached past $1 million, your likelihood of being sued starts to increase exponentially when an attorney looks into like the assets. And so if you are an LLC that has less than $1 million of asset worth, and $1 million of value is different than $1 million of equity. And so I'm saying only have $1 million of value. Even if somebody were to come after you, you still have a mortgage tied to that property, and they're going to have to acquire it or take it with that mortgage debt, or they're just putting a judgment against you, just like another creditor would. So, those are things that you would just have to value. And I don't know, $1 million is just kind of like the number that comes to my mind.
That feels good. Okay.
Yeah.
So what about the folks out there listening that have done really well for themselves, that maybe have a larger asset? Maybe it's a small apartment building that's worth $1.5 million. They're listening to this like, oh crap, like, do I split this up amongst 2 LLCs now? So once someone's single property value comes north of $1 million, what would you recommend that they do?
Well, if it's one whole single asset, they would have to keep it in one single LLC. You couldn't really separate it unless you bought it condoed and you had separate deeds for each individual unit. But assuming you bought the building as one deed, it would have to be under one entity.
Okay. So at that point, Are you recommending umbrella insurance for extra liability protection? Where do you like to see people go?
Yeah, I mean, once you've kind of reached the threshold where you have multiple units within a property, it is a good idea to have an umbrella policy. I'm also a fan of having a holding company own your LLC just to create additional liability protection. And I also recommend people be clear as to where you're going to incorporate. And so different states have different laws about incorporation. And so states like Wyoming, Nevada, and Delaware tend to have more favorable um, incorporation laws and more protections, creating more anonymity. It's harder to find out who you are. You can have a registered agent address where people can't really know that it's you. And so for me, I use the state of Wyoming because they have some lower filing costs and more protections. And so that's typically a state that I recommend people look into when they're thinking about starting their LLC or a holding company.
Yep, makes total sense. So then does Pennsylvania not have any reporting requirements for you to report it as like a foreign entity because you live in Pennsylvania?
So it's interesting because what I do is I have my LLCs based in Pennsylvania, but my holding company that owns the LLCs are based in Wyoming.
Ah, okay. And so you as the I don't know what you would be called, operator of the holding company, you don't have to report that holding company information to Pennsylvania?
Well, I do, but it doesn't matter that it's in another state.
I got it.
Mhm.
I got it. Okay, cool. See, I live in California. They want to know everything
Oh,
about
yeah.
everything. And so because I've looked into this strategy and I'm like, yeah, the anonymity piece kind of goes immediately out the window because I live in California. So I have to report to California. Nope, it's me, Michael, that owns the holding company. It's kind of unfortunate.
Right, right.
But okay. All right. So going back then to the taking title question, because this is a question that I get all the time from a lot of the investors I work with. So many people go to get conventional financing from a bank. The bank says, nope, we're only going to lend to you, Michael. We're not going to lend to your LLC. So I say, okay, great. So I take title, I close, I get my financing in the name of me, Michael. Then I own the property for, let's call it 6 months, and then transfer it using a quick claim deed, which I also want to ask about, to my LLC. Now I get sued. Can somebody not look at the chain of title and say, oh, well, yeah, 123 LLC owns it, but really that's just Michael. And we know that Michael's got a bunch of money outside of the LLC. How does that all work?
So the LLC by design is a limited liability company. And so once you do that quick claim deed, they might be able to find out who you are, but you could have sold that, quit claim to another entity. So there's no way of truly proving who, the owner is. And because you did transfer it, you just created your own protection. They can't come
Mm.
after you personally. They can only come after Michael's LLC.
Even though I'm in the chain of title, my name is associated with the property. They don't know that this LLC necessarily
They
isn't
can't touch
mine.
you because the
They can't.
ownership of the property is the LLC.
Okay, great. Even though, I mean, could they see that the loan, the current active loan associated with the property is tied to my name personally? How does that work?
Yeah, so the loan, the mortgage, and the deed are two separate documents. And so there is no connection. Like I buy a lot of property subject to, so people might see somebody else's name on the mortgage, but my LLC is the owner of the property. And that's really a good way too of people who they're like, I want to protect myself right off the bat. Okay, if you don't need traditional financing, go for it. You can go ahead and own the property as the LLC outright. It's just the FDIC banks that generally require you own it as your personal name unless you have some credit built up within the LLC already.
Right, right. Okay, interesting. So then how does it work when somebody goes and sues you and you say, you have a $1 million property, but you have a loan of $800,000 on it. They sue you, Mallory, or they sue Mallory's LLC, and you go, well, not so fast. Actually, there's $800,000 of debt on the property, but the debt is in someone else's name. How does that all work?
So, what they would do is, the debt aside, they would be putting a judgment against the property. And so it would be against the LLC. And, obviously somebody could sue you for more than what the property is worth. And then at the time, but here's the thing with judgments and with suing an LLC, they are only eligible to collect the money when that property then is sold. If you decide that you're going to hold on to it forever, you could have a judgment from somebody until, you're 50. And unless they're the ones who are actively pursuing the judgment, or, you need to have clean title when you sell, they'll probably wait to get paid for years.
What? How is this not talked about more often? When everyone says, "Oh, you're going to get sued as a property owner, as an investor," but this piece is I've never heard of. That's so interesting. So that's how legal suits against LLCs that own property work. Is this kind of unique to property
Yeah, I
ownership?
mean, if the LLC has no liquid assets, meaning there's no cash in the bank and there's no
Ah,
other, that's why
that's the piece.
yes, that's why it's important to not keep too much of a reserve in that particular account. It's always good to do some sort of like owner draw, owner distributions, so that in the event you were sued, that asset, that liquid cash asset, cannot be touched.
Interesting. Okay. And this is assuming that you've already exhausted your insurance benefit. You get sued and the insurance comes in and says, "Hey, here's $1 million of coverage, but you got sued for 1.5." The judgment is going to then be for the leftover 500 grand. If you don't have cash to give them, that's a judgment on the property that they can't collect until the property gets sold. Oh, this is incredible. This is incredible. This is
Now,
game changing.
if you are selling it and you need clean title, that judgment will need to be cleared out. So
Right, right,
if you
right.
don't
Okay.
plan on selling the asset, though, that judgment is just going to stay on there.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, this is so interesting. This is so interesting. All right, so is the LLC the best vehicle that you like to see investors utilize for property investing?
Yeah, it's the simplest, it's the easiest to create, it's the easiest to manage as far as a filing standpoint, as far as tax reportings. It gets a little bit more complex once you start adding different types of properties, or you are expanding to a level that it makes more sense to have a corporation. But that's always something to talk to your tax professional about before entering into a new venture, as to, hey, I have these LLCs, what's going to be better for me on a tax standpoint? Would it be more advantageous to create the C corp or keep this still in an LLC structure?
Okay. That's my tax professional's favorite line is, "Oh, that's an attorney question." And then I go ask the attorney and they go, "Oh, that's a tax professional question." I'm like, "Come on, I got to get the two of them on a call together to talk it through." But that's a
Right.
$500 an hour call, so who knows?
Oh.
It's so worth it though. It is so worth it. I used to try to skimp on that kind of stuff and quickly realized, no, it's so worth paying the money to the professionals to just do it right, because you
Mhm.
pay for it now or you're probably going to pay for it down the road, and it's going to be
More.
exorbitantly more
Yep.
expensive down the road. Yeah. So
Mhm.
do it right the first time, folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where do you, I mean, you've been doing this a long time. You've seen a lot of investors, you've worked with a lot of investors.
Mhm.
Where do you see people get it wrong when it comes to the legal side of things? Is it the Michaels of the world trying to skimp out and do it the DIYs? Or is there a red thread? Is there a commonality that you're like, I wish if people just stopped doing this,
You know,
things would be better?
I find a lot of people make the mistakes in the tenant placements. And so,
Say more.
screening the tenants, understanding what you have in your lease, what you can charge, what you can't charge, showing up when there's a notice requirement. And, this is like, the mom and pop kind of shops where they come in and maybe it was an inherited property and they walk on into the property after just knocking the door and say it's inspection time, or, oh, I needed to grab tools from the back shed, or and
Yeah.
then that's where you start to get into some problems. Eviction is always a nasty thing, so it's once you get to that point, a lot of people make some mistakes. They don't do it soon enough, or they don't follow the right process to actually get the tenant out. And
Mm.
especially in states that are more tenant friendly, like California and New York, that can really be a very, very tricky process.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you're seeing that more so with self-management as opposed to, or do you see it with property management companies as well?
I mean, I have seen it with property management companies, but if you are able to find a good, reliable property management company, they take care of everything. They should know exactly what needs to happen when a tenant's not paying, all the correct filing procedures in your state,
Mm-hmm.
how to effectuate this eviction quickly and seamlessly, because I've seen
Yeah.
people get burned on, the tenant causes damage and the tenant hasn't paid and won't leave. And, you have these holdover tenants. And so utilities aren't being paid. And the landlord now is stuck with all of these additional bills. And this was a big, big problem during COVID when we had the
Uh,
moratorium that they couldn't be evicted. And
right.
so we saw a lot of people kind of racking up a lot of debt in certain areas.
Interesting. From a legal perspective, is there what's the word, a strategy that investors can take that is more, for lack of a better term, safer or less safe? And I'm talking like short term, mid-term, long-term rentals, remote versus local investing. Is there a combination that you see? Okay, if you're going to be doing long-term, short-term, excuse me, if you're doing remote, short-term investing, beware, because that's a dangerous combo. Versus if you're doing local, long-term investing, yeah, it's relatively safe. Or does that not exist? You're just as likely to be sued regardless of what you're doing if you own property.
Yeah, I mean, I think your probability of being sued could happen at any point in time in any area. I think it just kind of depends on who's on your team. And so, do
Mm,
you have a team of professionals wherever you're located, even if it's in your backyard, that you can call an attorney that understands the local policy? If you're investing remotely, do you have a good, reliable property management company that also has reliable contractors, that also does proper tenant screening and all of these factors? So I think it just really comes down to, once you've started investing, ensuring that you have the proper team in place for that particular area and that particular asset.
Yep, I think that makes a ton of sense. I think it makes a ton of sense. And so, getting back to someone who's just getting started, I mean, we talk so much, we do too at the Bold Academy, and educating people about getting the right team members. And I think we all put so much emphasis on it because it is so important. And by that same token, I think a lot of people again get tripped up by, oh, I have to do all of these things in this order before I can ever start investing. And from a legal perspective, I mean, how much legal assistance do you really need if you're just getting started buying your first single family home?
I mean, really, when you're just getting started and you're buying your first property, you're going to need an attorney to do, some deed work and some title insurance work. And maybe you pay for a lease that's, customized to your specific asset class. But other than that, you should just start. And when you have questions along the way, that's when at least you have a team member or a partner that you can call and actually bounce questions off of. So it's not a bad idea to have an attorney on retainer, just so that in the event you were to need to take action or need to get a response, they're already a part of, your portfolio, we'll say.
Okay, I dig it. I dig it. All right, Mallory, this has been awesome. I want to zoom out for just a minute. It's 2025. We're recording this in the middle of the year. Are you teaching summer school, by the way, or is school out for summer?
School's out for summer.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to come back in fall of 2025 and you're teaching folks. Are you talking to them about cash flow, or are they looking at you like, Professor M, that's a thing of the past? What are you talking about?
I mean, what investor doesn't want cash flow? That's kind of, one of those things. Now, you're going to have to look a little bit harder sometimes for those cash flow deals. But honestly, this market where we sit right now, with high interest rates, a lot of uncertainty, we have a proposed tax bill that's, going through Congress and the Senate. This is the time that people are nervous. This is the
Right.
time where people are scared. And so, as a real estate investor, you got to think like a shark. If there's blood in the water, that's the time to attack. This
Mm-hmm.
is the time to really take advantage, because you're going to be able to find better deals. If property owners know that if they want to sell, that people are going to need financing. And if that financing doesn't align, they're going to have to lower their purchase price. And so while you may have to pay higher interest right now,
Well, and insurance.
and insurance, yeah, insurance is a whole other whole
That's
other
a whole other
topic.
can of worms.
Yeah, you're going to have to pay higher interest now. The hope would be that, in the next year or two, that interest rates are coming down and that you can refinance that and you got it at that lower price because people are scared. They are uncertain and they don't know what to do. This is probably one of those, it's almost like a 2008 feel of, people obviously without the crash, but the same kind of sentiments that we saw during that time frame of people just don't know what to do. They're nervous, prices are plummeting, and take advantage of that.
Yeah. So I hear this sentiment a lot of buy today, interest rates are high, yes, but the hope is that they will come down. And something that I've always tried to keep in front of mind for myself is that hope is not a plan. Hope is not a reasonable plan. So how confident are you when making those recommendations and saying, okay, let's hope interest rates come down? Are you that interest rates will come down?
Yeah, so I think that given where we're at and where we have been, this is a pretty high interest rate environment. And once the market starts to stabilize, I would imagine interest rates are going to hover right between 4.5% to 5.5%. That's kind of the sweet spot that I believe the Fed is targeting. Now, obviously, I have no crystal ball, but if somebody
So you heard it here first, folks.
if someone's investing and they're looking to maybe make some improvements in the property, now you're adding additional equity so that even if rates weren't to drop too much, your equity that you can borrow is going to be greater in the future than it was when you initially took the ownership. And so you're going to be able to look at better leverage opportunities, which could provide you with lower interest rates. Looking at maybe local banks, they generally have like local credit unions or small regional banks generally are able to have a little bit more flexibility with interest rates. So finding alternatives to a traditional mainstream bank could be options as well.
No, totally. I think that's great. I think that's great. What I always tell people is, look, if you like the deal at today's rates, you're going to love it in 5 years. It's only going to get better with time.
Yeah. And,
so just make sure it works today, though.
Right. And to your point about cash flow, a lot of people nervous about, okay, is this property going to cost me money or am I going to make money? And even if it doesn't fully cash flow in its first year, which, sometimes they don't, you're going to get the benefit of depreciation. And so you should be seeing that benefit once you file taxes. And so, you may have a windfall of cash flow when you get a tax return versus every month throughout the year when you're collecting rent.
Totally. No, I think that's a great way to think about it. And like zooming out, and I always tell people, look at the whole picture. What's the total return? Your cash flow, your tax benefits, your loan paid on, your appreciation, because these four things are typically going to far outweigh the cash flow, cash on cash return. And so if you're on the fence about a deal, zoom out a little bit.
Yeah. And, I even compare this to if you were going to invest in the stock market. How much is the stock paying you in dividends? Are you guaranteed dividends every single month? No. And at the end of the year, when you're filing your taxes, what benefits do you get that you're afforded for investing in those stocks?
Right.
So
the chance to participate on a call or vote, send in your share, your voter share thing, not a whole lot.
Yeah.
Mallory, my last question for you before we get you out of here is, you talked about kind of like 2008 sentiment, a lot of uncertainty in the market right now. How are you thinking about ways to not catch a falling knife? Meaning if we buy the property today and we're at the beginning of a crash or the beginning of a correction, now 2 months from now, 3 months from now, the value is even lower.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you're going to find that in any sort of investing opportunity that you might not hit it right at the right time. The way to protect yourself is to ensure you have the right idea behind the strategy you're investing in. So if you buy a short-term rental and things change in the market. One of the things we experience here is that, there's been a lot of regulation behind short-term rentals and where you can have them and how long you can rent them out for. You just have to always be able to pivot. And I think that that's an important thing for people to know is if I bought this property and my plan was short-term, what would my cash flow or what would this look like if I had to turn it into a midterm or a long-term?
Mm-hmm.
And that way you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
balancing things out. And, thinking about property values, especially while you're holding the asset, is never a good idea to think about because you own it. It's yours and it's yours to improve. It's yours to grow. That should be a counter thought.
Yeah, no, I totally agree because I get this question all the time too, and I'm like thinking through it. Well, okay, you buy it today, tomorrow the value drops 20%. What has changed for you in terms of nothing? Just the fact that your paper net worth evaporated or decreased by 20%, but that's not something that you could use right now anyhow. You could refinance 6 months, a year from now, maybe, but you just understand what it actually impacts, how it impacts you as the owner. Is what I would say to anybody listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
Thank you. Mallory, this was awesome. So much fun. I love chatting with you.
Thank you, Michael.
No, of course. Thank you. For people that want to find out more about you, reach out to you about your course, contact you, whatever. How is the best place for people to get in touch?
Yeah, they can reach out to me on any social media. I'm on LinkedIn, Mallory Meehan. I'm on Instagram. Prof M, PSU. I'm on Facebook, Inspire Wealth Management and Education. So really lots of different ways to reach out. I'll give them my email that, they can reach out to you. Happy to set up a consultation call if people are thinking about investing or if they want to learn more and take my class.
Awesome. Mallory, thank you again. Really appreciate it. And we will definitely be in touch soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Michael.
All right. You got it. Take care. All right, everyone, that was our show. A big thank you to Mallory for coming on. She is just a wealth of knowledge and doing a bunch of really cool things. So definitely go check out her course and her podcast. As always, we'd love to hear from you. Ratings and reviews are super helpful to reach a bigger audience. And we want to know what it is you want to hear more of. So feel free to drop us a line there. We look forward to seeing you on the next one. Happy investing.